Welcome, students. We're going to take some notes on the political spectrum, looking at the difference between the left and the right. Um, you have, you will take a political spectrum quiz at the end of this notes, so this will help you to kind of understand where you stand politically. Let's begin. So when we look at political ideology, it's a set of beliefs about politics, public policy, and public purpose. And so when we talk about public, we're talking about the government. Private is individuals, public is the government. So political ideology is going to lean either left, which is typically more the Democratic Party, more liberal, more progressive, or it's going to lean more right, conservative, or Republican. As I've mentioned many times, the Democratic Party, they look to the future, they look ahead, while the Republican Party, they look to the past for light. And so you have two different ideologies that look at two different spectrums of time and what is important. For conservatives, Republicans, it's preserving the traditions of the past. For progressives, liberals, Democrats, it's about progressing towards the future. Factors that determine placement on the political spectrum. You have a couple different factors here. You have one, how much social change a person is willing to have within their society and government. Then you also have how much government involvement in the economy a person calls for. So as you see right here, you have social change and you also have economic change. So we're not just dealing with one factor, we're dealing with not just a one-dimensional issue, but we're dealing with society and the economy. And that's what makes the political spectrum more than just a Republican versus Democrat. It's actually a little bit more multi-dimensional than that, because you'll also have authoritarian and then libertarian. And so there's really four different eras or parts that you could fit in, but we really have a two-party system. Your feelings on social issues and economic issues reveal your political feelings. And so the three things that we look at in history is social, economic, political. And so it's really the social, the economic base of the pyramid that shows you where you fit politically on that triangle. Looking at the political spectrum, so you're working on your notes sheet chart. So there's several different things on this chart that you need to notice. You can see the information here. We're looking more at liberal versus conservative. We're not going to focus so much on radical or reactionary. So on your chart, it'll ask for several items, such as government involvement. So for liberal, you should know that it's more government involvement. With conservative, it's less. Speed of change is also on that chart, and that is going to be gradual, that there's going to be gradual change. And we see that with different laws in society, that liberals are more into the government creating more laws for more change. Conservatives, however, don't want a lot of change. They want to keep the same. Looking at actual issues, liberals typically desire higher taxes and state control over the economy, whereas conservatives usually want lower taxes and reduce the government services and regulations on the economy. And so liberals typically they want higher taxes so that they can have more government services, because remember, the government is creating change, versus conservatives, they don't want the change, and so therefore they want lower taxes. Government involved subsidies, public education through college level, that's more liberal. Conservative government turns control to local agencies, vouchers, okay, things like that. So conservatives want more voter choice when it comes to education, whereas liberals, they trust the government education system, and so they want to mandate that. When it comes to defense, liberals typically want less defense spending, and they want to focus more on diplomacy, whereas conservatives, they want to increase the defense spending because they want to increase America's strength presence versus simply diplomacy around the world. Coming to the environment, liberals typically want to have natural resources protected. They want to steer away from some of those crude forms of energy, whereas conservatives typically um, focus on less regulation um, and support exploration of federal land for new energy resources. So you really have a liberals typically are going to be more about um, less freedom in the economy, but more freedom socially, whereas conservatives are going to want more freedom in the economy, but less freedom socially. Political parties and ideologies. History of the political parties. Why the two-party system? That's what everybody wonders. Why do we just have red versus blue? Well, single-member districts, plurality is needed. We have a winner-takes-all system, which discourages the third-party candidates. And so when you have states that you win 51% or more of the popular vote within the state, you get all the electoral votes in the state. For example, with California, that has 55 electoral votes, um, and you win 51% or more of the popular vote within California, you get all those electoral votes. So if there was a third party, they might win nationwide a certain percentage of the votes, but to actually win an individual state is pretty challenging. And so we really have that two-party system there because of the 50 to 51%. Most can identify with one or the other. So because most people can lean one towards the other side, um, they can, generally the two-party system works. This is more tradition, not constitution. So that's very important to note that the two-party system is not in the Constitution. It's more of a tradition. So really understanding that is pretty important. There are other options, though. Conflicts about the Constitution created two opposing viewpoints and Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. So historically, um, it was the conflicts over the Constitution that really created the two-party system. You had those who were in favor of the Federalist model that had a strong federal government with the state governments underneath that. But then the Anti-Federalists said, no, we want to focus more on state governments and not the federal government. So, history of political parties, there are other options out there. We have the multi-party system, and then we have the one-party system. As you can see in this map, the one-party system, China and Cuba, Vietnam, a few other countries are still the one-party system. That's typically communistic type system. The countries in red used to have a one-party system. Now, when you have one party, you don't have options. You don't have elections. You just have that one party really running the government. And so that's more authoritarian. As you see right here, the blue is the multi-party system. Typically, the Brits more have voted the multi-party system, where you don't have two major parties, but you have multiple parties. And so the challenge with that is that it does water down the elections. It makes it less able to work efficiently, but there are more options out there. Role of political parties. The political parties, as much as we dislike them, they do have some roles. Nominate candidates. They choose and support a candidate. They endorse a candidate, and it gets the people to galvanize and to unite again for a candidate. They inform and activate supporters, and so it's really giving a lot of knowledge and understanding to a candidate. And I would say the nominating conventions and the support are probably the two biggest things. Govern, make laws, decisions, but also you have that linkage right? So linking the people and the government, really creating that link. I think that's pretty important as well. It also allows for opinions to be heard and also a sense of accountability. I think that's important too. If we only had one party system, let's say the Republicans were the only political party, then there would be nobody to really challenge them or to expose issues within their party. Same thing with the Democrats. If it was only the Democratic Party, the Republicans are needed to expose issues and weaknesses within their own party. So having this sense of balance, I believe, is very important. As much as we hate political parties, they do tend to balance each other out and to expose issues with the other side. As you see right here, most voters do not like the two parties. Most voters are independents. Um, about 15 years ago, it was about 40% were independents. Today, it's closer to 50%. So, really understanding that most people are moderate, most Americans are moderate and not on one side or the other. Yes, people lean more Republican, 41%. Um, Other people lean 45% Democrat. And so you do have those leanings, but staunch Republicans are only 25%. Staunch Democrats are only 27%. And that's changed since George W. Bush's presidency in 2004. Political identification. So, as I mentioned before, you are going to take a political quiz and you're going to see where you fit politically. Are you a core conservative? Um, are you a new era enterpriser? Are you a bystander? Are you devout and diverse? Or are you solid liberal? Okay, so you'll see where you fit. General public, you can see right here. As you see right here, it's not just about left versus right. That's on the economy. It's also about social um, on the other axis as well. So you have more authoritarian governments right here on the left. You have more of the communistic governments right here, Stalin, Mao Zedong, and such. But then you also have on the right more of the authoritarian, whether it's an Adolf Hitler or whether it's a Donald Trump. People have said actually even Hillary Clinton is more on this side versus that side because she's not completely communistic. She's more socialistic. Down here, you have more of the libertarian that lean more down here. So you have more of a Gandhi down here, or you have some other philosophers down there. Margaret or Anne Rand would be an individual down there. Perception of the party's bias. As you can see right here with the political cartoons, there's this perception that both sides can't work together, that they're very extreme, um, while most Americans want for some sense of moderation. Trends of political parties. Fewer people are loyal party members today. So back in the day, there used to be a little bit more connection to political parties, but more and more people are less loyal to their political party. There's an increase in the split ticket voting. That means voting for officials of different parties in the same election. So if you're voting in 2020, you'll vote for some Republican and some Democrat because you're looking at not so much of the political backing, but you're looking at the individual themselves. Or maybe you're trying to just bring balance to the two party system. As you can see right here, the beauty of the American democracy is that we've had presidents on either side. Every 4 to 12 years, we will have a Republican or a Democrat, ranging from the beginning of time back to Washington's presidency. So generally, every 12 to 4 years, you'll have a different president. So you can assume that either this election or in 8 years, there'll be a Democrat in the White House because it fluctuates back and forth, which is kind of neat because it does bring balance to political parties. Parties are not very organized and usually fragmented. No real chain of command exists. The National Committee plans national conventions where party platforms are decided. And that's pretty important when it comes to the um, presidential elections, is that there's a national committee that has the national convention where they endorse a candidate. So the Democrats won't be split between um, two individuals, such as a Bernie Sanders and a Joe Biden, but they'll be able to galvanize between, unify one political um, candidate. We do have minor parties, third parties here. The characteristics of the third parties really no real chance of winning major elections, but may impact the outcome. So, for example, libertarian or independent could take votes away from one of the sides, and that happened in 1992. Ross Perot was running as independent, and he actually took 20% of the um, uh, popular vote, not electoral vote, popular vote from the Republican. And so that allowed for Bill Clinton to win the presidency. Large number and variety. So you definitely have a lot of variety of political parties out there. There are minor parties, maybe temporary or long lasting. So some last for just a little while, others for a long time. For example, the Marijuana Party is a very recent party, whereas the Independent American Party is a longer lasting party. Many may center around one idea or many. So they could have just one focus, or they could have multiple different focuses that they have. Thank you for taking these notes.